Morning, we're interviewing Mr. Richard Ward of Linden, Indiana.
Address is Crawfordsville.
The address is Crawfordsville. Dick was a junior at Purdue University when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor December 7th, 1941. And when did you enlist in the Navy?
January 1942.
You don't remember the date?
Don't remember the exact date.
Exact date.
But it was in that month.
And since you were a junior, the Navy said you were to finish your education.
That's right.
So when did you report for active duty?
I reported for active duty in August of 43.
August of 43. And then you went
directly to Northwestern University for officers training.
And how long did that last?
About, I guess, they call us 90-day wonders, but I guess it's about 120 days.
120 days. You were commissioned an ensign.
Yes.
And from there, where?
I went to the Pacific area in San Francisco Bay. I was put on coastal minesweepers, and there were 6 of us, 6 coastal minesweepers, and we patrolled from the Farallon Islands out into San Francisco Bay. And any time that any capital ships came in, like battleships, cruisers, and we'd patrol those lanes for 72 hours straight, because we didn't want to take any chances of a mine being laid and losing a capital ship in that waterway, because that would have dried up the whole Bay Area. We were afraid when I was on duty there that the Japanese would sneak in with a submarine and shoot what they call a torpedo mine that would come in and then expend itself and then settle down to the bottom of the bay, and then some capital ship would go and explode it. So we were on constant guard for this all the time. So.
And how long were you on this minesweeper?
I was on that about 6 months. And during that time, we came into the bay one evening, and San Francisco Bay has a lot of currents that are very swift. And there were 2 submarine gates in the San Francisco harbor. One was for these coastal minesweepers, which was a small gate to one side, and the main gate for capital ships to go through was out in the center of the channel. When we came through, you could see the column of ships shift a little bit sideways as I went through that gate. Well, the captain of my ship probably didn't get the ship lined up quite right and hit the side of the subgate and knocked a hole in the side of the ship. We had 4 feet of water in the engine room in about 5 minutes with all bilge pumps running. So the captain beached the ship. And on that ship we had a fellow that had been an assistant chef at Indianapolis Country Club. So we ate pretty well. So I got amused at him. He had a cigar he was smoking. And I really, believe it or not, that guy slid off of that ship and swung ashore and still had that cigar lit. I couldn't believe that. Anyhow, they salvaged the ship, sent it to the dry docks for about 6 weeks. And during that time, they strapped a .38 caliber revolver on me and gave me a driver and told me I was to deliver the secret mail to all the ships in the Bay Area. And my instructions were that if anybody interfered with that, I would shoot to kill, which I had no problems at that time. And I did that for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then they pulled me off and sent me to mine warfare school at Yorktown, Virginia, which made me a specialist in mine warfare equipment on board ship. And that was a course of about 3 months and training. And then I was sent back to the San Francisco Bay area, and then was assigned to an AM in the Pacific, the 6th Fleet, to go on board that. And an AM's about the size of a destroyer with about 120 men and maybe 15 officers on board. And that ship went into Tokyo Bay to sweep the mines ahead of the Missouri before they signed the peace. However, before I got to that ship, before they shipped me out of San Francisco Bay, they started mustering fellows out, and they called us in and said, well, we're taking you out of the service. We're going to send you home. So that's basically what it was. Now, during the time that I was in Yorktown, they called me back to San Francisco Bay, and they court-martialed the skipper of my ship, former ship. And during the time before I went to Yorktown, he had ordered me to burn the ship's logs, which I knew should not be done under any circumstances. So I said to the skipper, I said, can I get the executive officer to help me with this? He said yes. So I went and talked to the executive officer and told him what he had done. So we went up together and had him give us the order again. I wasn't a witness to this. And he said, I want those ship logs burned. So we did what he told us, because he was our commanding officer. We went in, burnt the logs, and nothing happened for a while. And in the meantime, I got sent to Yorktown Mine Warfare School. And then they pulled me back during that court-martial for witness. And obviously, as you know, they threw the book at that captain.
They got bad time?
They demoted him and sent him to landing craft in Virginia someplace. And that's what happened to him. And then I went on back to Marine Warfare School and finished school, and then that's when I got reassigned. So I didn't see any action as such. I had some friends that were in action. Of course, my folks were, my mother was petrified when she heard I was going to Minesweepers, but really, Minesweepers is a fairly safe service, because the only time you really take a big chance is when you go through the minefield the first time. After that, we have paravanes on the side with explosive charges that cuts the cable off of the mine, floats it, and then you destroy it with machine gun fire. And we did always have to go over magnetic mines, because magnetic mines, the Germans were very, very astute in their mine warfare. They had mines that would go off on 4 milligas. That's not very much current. So we had to go through degaussing about every 6 weeks to make sure our ship would pass below that 4 milligas, so that we could pass over those mines and not hurt anything, because on board that ship we had a 1,200 brake horsepower GM engine with a 750 brake horse or a 750 kW generator, and then the two pretty large tails were married together, and then they went out and then separated about 250 feet, and that current passed through those, and that generator is what exploded those mines to the rear of us.
Wow.
So it was an interesting service, and I had enough electrical training, I guess, in the Navy. I came back and worked as an electrician, and I learned enough in the Navy to make a fool of myself. But anyhow, that by working as an electrician for a short period of time, I learned to do a lot of my own wiring after that. So.
You probably got out as a JG, didn't you, Lieutenant?
Well,
JG?
I had just been recommended to go to a JG when they started mustering us out. Of course, the Navy at that time was looking for ways to save money, so a group of us were sent home at that time. So.
Did you stay in the reserves any length of time?
No, I didn't. I got out and resigned at that time. So.
You had an interesting experience.
I had some fungus on my hands that I had gotten in the Pacific area, and at that time they didn't know how to treat it, and I think they were reluctant to send too many fellows out with that kind of problem. So that was one of the reasons that probably we didn't go that way. So since that time, I've gotten over it. So
They never gave you any medication for it.
well, see, I can't remember. Whenever they had it, they had what they call, I can't remember the name of the medication that you put on your hand, turned them purple. So,
Okay.
I can't remember the name of the material that they used.
Potassium permanganate, it sounds like.
No, I think that's right. That sounds right. That's right.
Well, Dick,
Did you, were these ships made of wood? Did they have wood hulls?
Yes, the AMCs that I was on in San Francisco Bay was made of wood. The YMS, which I was on in Chesapeake Bay in Yorktown, was wood. It was a considerably bigger ship than the AMC. And the AMs were a steel ship. They were about the size of a destroyer. Now, we always carried depth charges on those ships for submarine warfare that we could drop if we needed to. And of course, we had sonar or radar on board all the ships to find out if there were submarines in the area.
Where were you, and where was your boat stationed there in San Francisco?
Treasure Island.
Okay.
Out of Treasure Island. And we had 6 boats that was in, and of course the Coast Guard was there too. And that's where a lot of the ships in Treasure Island, capital ships, left for warfare in that area. The Treasure Island was a naval base. I think since the war it's not a naval base any longer.
I think it's decommissioned.
I think it's been decommissioned, yes.
Just
Now,
like,
there was a good deal of concern about the coast, particularly I think in the early part of the war. Were there any actual episodes?
No, the only episode we had on the west coast was a Japanese submarine surfaced south of San Francisco, and I can't remember exactly what city, and they shelled 2 or 3 shells and submerged and left. And but there was no action at all in San Francisco Bay. And this was the main port on the west coast, where a lot of supplies left. The capital ships came into Treasure Island. They had service areas that they repaired the capital ships, and all the ships really. So this was a concern of the Navy Department that something would happen in that channel to block it. That would have been a real disaster if it had.
Now, when your skipper was court-martialed, was he charged with a neglect in regard to his ship and hitting that gate, or was he court-martialed about the logs?
I think he was court-martialed mainly because of logs. It was a current like that, as I remember, the current like that, you have no control over the current. The only thing of it is, I think they indicated that he should have anticipated it and handled his ship a little differently. But the main thing that they got him on was burning the ship's logs, which in anybody's book is a no-no.
what was his rank before the court
I think he was a
martial?
captain, or two-striper. As
lieutenant.
Lieutenant, yeah, right.
What did they break him to, ensign?
No, I think he broke below that. I think he took all his credentials away from him.
So he became an enlisted man
Enlisted
after
man
that.
after that, yeah.
He's lucky he didn't get brig time.
That's right. That's right. But he was a fellow that, when he was on shore, drank a lot too, see, so I suspect there was times when he didn't think too straight.
Did you and your exec discuss going over his head about those logs before you?
Well, we didn't discuss going over his head. We discussed whether we should do it or not. And of course, we decided that we had to do it because he was our commanding officer. And the fact that you could have gone to commander of mine force, I suppose, but we could have been reprimanded if we had gone over his head.
Now, was
I
your
think.
executive officer lieutenant junior grade?
Pardon?
Was your executive officer, was he lieutenant junior grade?
Yes, he was lieutenant junior grade, yes.
Was there anything in those logs that you read before you burned them that was of interest?
Well, I think what happened is that the captain did not keep real good logs. I had noticed in the past before that happened that the logs were not up to date the way they should be.
Oh, big gaps.
And I think there was gaps in it, and I think he didn't want the Navy Department to know this. That's the reason he ordered them burned.
Wow. So, when you got out, what did you do? You came back home.
I came back home, and when I first came home, I became an inspector for the Indiana Seed Department up at Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
And I traveled Benton County and White County and inspected seed for certification in the field.
Right.
And then after that fall, I rented a farm from Mr. Elston, who was banker here in Crawfordsville. He owned a farm up on County Line Road and Stockwell Road. And I rented that 450 acres, and he, 2 years later, decided to sell the farm. And then after that, I went into business with my father. And have been a farmer all my life.
Did you buy the Elston farm?
No, we did not buy the
You
Elston
did
farm.
not?
We bought one of the Elston farms, which was south of us, our present operation. He had about 300 acres there, and we bought that.
I suspect land prices back then were very modest compared to today.
That's right. Matter of fact, I can remember Mr. Elston buying the South Farm in 1939, I believe, that we eventually bought. And they bought it from a man in Williamsport, and the man in Williamsport offered it to him for $80 an acre. Mr. Elston came in and said, well, I'll give you 70. He says, well, since you tried to negotiate with me, the price just went up to $90. That's what he paid.
$90
Yeah.
an acre, wow. That land today is probably worth $3,000 an acre.
About 2,700.
2,700.
Yeah.
That's interesting. This was 1939.
1939 when Mr. Elston bought it, yes.
We were just barely coming out of the Depression, if I remember
That's right,
correctly.
that's right. And then my father bought it, I believe it was in 1948, someplace in that area, 46 or 48. He bought two farms. He bought the place that we live on, bought my mother's brother out at that time, where we live, and then he bought the Elston place sometime later. So
That's interesting. So you farmed from then on.
I farmed from then on.
That is a very difficult occupation. The reason I say that, a farmer is at the mercy of the equipment manufacturer, the fertilizer manufacturer, weather, and then when he harvests a crop, he's at the mercy of the market and has to take whatever the market is offering at that time.
It's very true. I don't know whether you're acquainted with the present situation, but in the last 7 years, commodity prices have been down, livestock prices have been down, and The situation has been such that, for instance, our property tax that we pay now in the last 7 years has been more than what we've netted off of farms, believe it or not, and because of commodity prices. For instance, in 1951, I kept fairly good records. I got $2.49 for corn per bushel. And this last week, I believe corn was around $2.20 a bushel. Now, naturally, we increased our yields about 2.5 times, but during that period of time, our expenses have gone up approximately 25 to 30 times. So this has really put pressure on farms to keep their head above water, really, is what it's amounted to. So.
And I figure another thing, Dick, a young man today would not stand a chance getting into farming unless he had a father or a grandfather who sponsored him. Or, if the young man was astute, found a farmer who had just one child, a daughter, courted her carefully, and had his father-in-law help him start out.
That's very, very, very true. And when I was in the Navy, I sent most of my pay. I was out at sea, and I sent most of my pay back to my father. He invested it in bonds for me. When I got out of service, I had about $10,000 laid up, and that permitted me to buy used equipment, start farming. And a young man can't do that today because I can remember in 1953, I had a Super M tractor with a 2ME corn picker, 2-row corn picker mounted on it, delivered to me for $3,275. Well, that tractor today would cost you approximately $25,000 or more, just the tractor alone. And it's a young man can't find the capital. And of course, land, the first farm I bought was $400 an acre. And I guess the next land I bought after that was $700 an acre. And then the next farm I bought was $2,600 an acre. So, you know, that kind of things puts pressure on since the commodity prices have not improved.
That's true. That's very interesting. I studied ag econ.
That's what my major was.
And I still am interested in what goes on out in the field.
Right. It's a very interesting field. Matter of fact.
How many acres do you farm now?
Pardon?
How many acres do you farm now?
About 1,250.
And your son is in partnership with that, or?
Yeah, he's in partnership with us on that. When he was in high school, we're just about ready to graduate from high school, we had a CPA, and we formed corporations for estate planning, 3 of them. And CPA said, well, Rick, you'll never get in any cheaper, so he made Rick borrow the amount of money to pick up 10% of that corporation, operating corporation. And then Rick had to pay that off. And that he did, and then he bought another additional 5% since that time. And he's now owns part of the operating corporation. So.
Do you have any grandsons who will take over from your son?
No, I'm afraid not. We don't have any grandchildren. We have some step-grandchildren, which came into the family when they were adults in grade school and high school. And of course, they're nice kids, well-trained and so forth, but it's not like the kids that are born as grandchildren in the family, and they're not interested in the farm. So it looks like maybe the word relationship will end. Rick's the fourth generation on that farm, and it looks like it'll end at that time when he's through with it. So
That I understand. I've seen that happen with other families.
that's right. My wife and I are very disappointed we don't have grandchildren. Would like to take over sometime. So
I can relate to that.
yes.
Thank you very much, Dick, for coming in and sharing your experiences with us.
Well, thank you very much. I was disappointed that I didn't get over in the Pacific area and Japan area. Matter of fact, I tried to talk to guys that were decided to discharge it out of it. They wouldn't talk. So that's the way things, the ball rolls once in a while.
That's right.